Yellow people. To the yellow people. To the running people. Yeah.
Happy. Thanks to you, Barbara, and thanks to you, Bob, for everything that you said well. But people remember being happy, and that's a memory they've carried with them. And it's a very important thing to hold in your heart.
I think it's fair to say that everybody was floored by the number of people who visited Expo, particularly those with season passes. And I'm not one to keep memorabilia, but I have my season pass. I found it, and I'll show it to you later. I've got a beautiful Nick Kershaw flat top and very good shop pads. But Barbara, when you knew that the people coming through the gate were going to mean that there would be lines that you could not have anticipated before Expo began. There were times when there were lines that queued for 4 or 5 hours to go into pavilions. You then became the walkways producer because you realised that there had to be something to keep everybody happy on a line.
Yes, well, I'd seen, I've got a saying that that I've told many people over the years when they talk about Ric Birch disappearing so often and other people doing the work, and I say, well, you don't come up with great ideas, the big ideas sitting at your desk. So Expo, the entertainment program, developed and developed and developed right up until almost the last day. It kept developing. But in '86 I'd gone over to Vancouver. I'd seen some extraordinary performers who were unlike anything we'd ever seen in Australia. And I came back and I was the deputy director at that stage, and I said to Ric, we need this, we need walkways performers. And I tried to find a producer, a theatre producer in Australia who would put together this program of walkways performances, and of course it was such an unknown that the responses were always, but I'm a theatre producer. So I did take that one on because I thought it was so important. And just some of the people that we saw there before, talent such as we hadn't seen in Australia, but we wrote into the contracts, or there was an understanding with most of those international performers that they would train up Australian performers and help them hone their craft. And you saw Roger G on his roller skates there, roller skating mime. That sort of act was perfect for those cues because, of course, they could move along and they could entertain people, and they were great comic performers as well. I think that was a really important part of keeping people entertained in the queues and while they were waiting for the applicate, etc. And the pavilions were the core of Expo. The entertainment was always changing.
There's more than one occasion I know when people would be in a queue and they'd be getting to the front of the queue, but they'd be so enthralled in the show that would happen that they'd say to people, go ahead of me, I want to wait and see this finish and finish it off. Bob, for you, because you were so instrumental obviously in pulling this team of people about the big rock shows, you know, there were some huge nights on that river stage, and I think many of us would have wished that the river stage was one thing that had remained. Did you get to enjoy some of those moments as well?
Well, to be honest with you, in the entertainment division, we enjoyed being in the office as much as we enjoyed being out at Expo. But we pretty much worked, you know, from 9 a.m. till 10 p.m. every day. And then we'd scoot off for the big shows, probably get to watch half an hour of it and then hop back to the office. But there was such an extraordinary array of entertainment that was able to happen there. And people who say, oh, I wish we could have kept the river stage. Yes, except like every venue, you then have to continue putting stuff on in there. That being the problem. So it was never designed to ultimately, you know, to stay in place because there was no budget to keep programming it. But we did. David was just reminding me. David, our Piazza producer, is here, and he was reminding me that. Well, a number of our staff partied more than we did, that a couple of days before Expo finished, David was right next door to me, and we'd be there saying goodbye at 10:15, that we got quick access to pavilions about 2 days out, and he and I did a scurry around the side to see as much as we could that we'd missed before. But really, certainly in our division, there was nowhere that people wanted to be other than at work. So it was a terrific win-win.
Did you have any trouble getting those big names when it came to some of those concerts that we had?
Well, I think it was a bit unconventional for a lot of the thinking to perform on a venue like this, because of course they were performing in the big, you know, the big venues around Australia. But Expo really got such a go on that it became easier to convince that artist management to bring them to Expo. But you know, when you kick off with Little River Band and you've got a few others like John Farnham and Joe Cocker, one of my personal favourites, etc., already signed up, it was much easier to get other people to follow.
Well,
It was interesting for me. I've got some friends who live at Kangaroo Point, and they have a Christmas party every year. And I think I left about 11 last year, and a friend and I walked through Southbank, and we talk about it being the happiest place on earth during Expo. But I was absolutely amazed on a Saturday evening, 11 o'clock, walking along through Southbank, families, kids swimming, people, you know, kids running around and people being happy. And I thought then, it's still the safe, happy place that it was in 1988.
It goes on.
It
It goes on.
Barbara, why do you think it's important though, like in these years when it's a 30-year anniversary, for us to really acknowledge that little spot in our history?
Oh, look, I'm a person who really, you know, looks forward rather than looking backward. But of course, when you do look backward, you'd really love to be able to think of some ways in normal everyday life to create that sense that we had at Expo. You know, personally, I think it can be created in one scale or another in workplaces and other environments. But it's up to people to think that making people happy, making work fun, and giving them those sorts of experiences is as important as getting the work done, you know, the productivity count.
We have such positive views of it in hindsight, but I have to say, you can draw a parallel to a recent big event where their closing ceremony may have not gone as well as anticipated or hoped. So clearly doing this is not easy, and after 30 years there are still hits and misses. It doesn't feel though that when we look back at Expo and we share these stories that there were any big misses.
Because you had terrific people doing it. Terrific people doing
You know,
it.
do you think that was just that it happened to be at that time, or can we just go, this was an extraordinary group of people who just did a really amazing job?
Yes. I can say that because I wasn't doing it. So no, I think we did have, very luckily perhaps it was fortuitous that this great group of people came together. Not just this, but people like, you know, John Truscott, and we're going to hear more about Lou Edwards at all. Ned Williams, who doesn't get talked about much, Sir Edward Williams, was a great personality. He was a great presence for Expo. Everything, I don't think, and I don't know if anybody in this room can think of any mistakes made. I can't think of any mistakes that were made during Expo. I can't think of any glitches. Oh, there were little tiny glitches.
Little tiny ones, but not
nothing.
That's not one that people found out
And I think that's what I'm getting at. I think it's a testament to an extraordinary group of people who all had a common goal and vision and then were able to execute it, given the ability to be able to do that, because it's a major undertaking and one that we as a community and a city will be ever grateful for.
And people who actually understood Brisbane and Queensland, when you were talking about that other event, that might have been the problem with it. They didn't quite get the feeling of what we're on about here. And even though there were people from overseas, and John Truscott came from Melbourne, and lots of people from other places came and helped, but the core people understood Brisbane, understood Queensland, and knew what they were
This
about.
World Expo, and I can remember very vividly, was unapologetically Australian. From the way, you know, when you came in and you were greeted, yay!
It was authentic.
It was very authentic in our delivery. We weren't trying to be something else. And I think that when you talk about our city being on show for the first time and Expo not going to one of the southern states, nobody tried to make Brisbane something other than it was for World Expo, did they?
Absolutely, and I think, Brad, we've continued to do that. We are who we are, and we're proud of it.
We're
Show the world.
Everybody's going to have that song now as an earworm in their head. We might play it again before the next panel, just so it's well and truly in there. I'll finish off, Bob, by asking you, before we let everybody continue on with their main meal, you know, we can't help, as I said, when it is an anniversary year, to look back at all of the people, and you mentioned a couple of them that were pivotal. But do you think that there is anybody who went through Expo who hasn't kept a little bit of it in their heart?
No, I think everybody, whether as part of the organising team or whether they were just a visitor for a day, everybody had that feeling. And I think for us that were involved in it, and like with James from day one, we went through, and maybe this was part of it, we went through a very tough time there for a long time. And so maybe that just made you that little bit more, God, we're going to prove these buggers wrong. We will really make it happen.
Because I think that was very important. Everybody said it couldn't be done. People from the south said, Brisbane, Expo, gosh, it could be chaos. Why would we want it? And then people came and went, wow, isn't this fantastic? So for us, there was that element of, we've showed you, and for other people, it was the element of surprise. And therefore, perhaps because their expectations were rather low, they enjoyed it even more.
And we're so glad that they did. Please put your hands together for us. We'll have main meal served now, and then we'll be back up.
To the Kingaroy Heritage Museum. We're here at the official launch of the 30th anniversary exhibit. We have our official guest, Sally Ann Atkinson, the former Lord Mayor of Brisbane during 1988. And she's here to officially launch and cut the ribbon. So thank you very much for coming. How was your trip here?